Okay, so how will Trump tariffs impact prices for Americans? Well, we were just talking about it just a moment ago. CNN already has it up here. Let's check this out.
Take a look at this. The Dow Jones. Oof. And specifically notice when it starts getting red, right around 130 or so. Yeah, in the last hour, Wall Street investors appear to be rattled after the White House said that President Trump is sticking to his February 1st deadline for new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Tariffs that could raise prices for many products that Americans buy, potentially stoking inflation. Let's get the latest from CNN's Matt Egan. Matt, what can you tell us about these tariffs and what it could mean for the price of everyday goods?
Well, Boris, we could be on the verge of the first shots being fired in what would be a trade war in North America. Because remember, it's not just these 25% tariffs that have been threatened by President Trump on Canada and on Mexico. It's also the retaliation that they have promised as well. And as you pointed out, this did not go over so well on Wall Street. The moment that this news came out from the White House that the tariffs are still on track to happen, we did see a noticeable dip in the stock market with the Dow moving solidly lower. Now, look, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. It's still possible that...
I will tell you what's going to happen. Well, Justin Trudeau will do his little thing. The president of Mexico will do her thing, and that will have an impact. You know, I think there's a lot of stuff being brought from Mexico. It's going to go up in price. But if you think for one fucking second that the Chinese will shut up and take it when you put a 10% tariff on their asses, you don't know those people. They will rip you a new asshole. Right next to the asshole you have, there's going to be a Chinese company ripping you a new asshole. Right next to it. Yes. Prepare for that. Prepare for a new Chinese-made asshole right next to your ass. I'm serious, man. Do you... How the fuck do you start a war with China? How the fuck do you start a trade war with the greatest producer of the planet that does everything you need? They're not going to just take it. They don't have to. They're bigger than you. In terms of actually producing tons of shit, yeah, it is all made in China. But it's all made in fucking China. These guys do 80% of the stuff you see in Walmart. That's their deal, right? And this will have a massive... I think he made a fucking mistake. I think it was a huge mistake, especially dealing with the Chinese, probably Mexico too.
President Trump decides to delay when these tariffs get implemented or cancel them altogether. But we do know that he views these tariffs as sort of a magical negotiating tool that can solve almost any problem. Of course, this would be a risky gamble because the United States imports a lot of goods from Canada and from Mexico, not to mention from China as well. Last year alone, the U.S. imported $400 billion of goods from Canada, everything from oil and minerals to cement, wood, and paper goods. This is also a major place where the United States imports food from Mexico in particular, right? Roughly 90% of the avocados that get imported into the United States come from Mexico. Same thing for tomatoes. The auto industry in North America is also very closely linked together. That's why analysts have said that tariffs like this would be devastating to the auto industry and would lift the price of the average cost sold, the cost of the average car sold in the United States by $3,000. Now, meanwhile, there's also the risk that all of this could lift gasoline prices because Canada is the biggest source of foreign oil into the United States. The U.S. imports about 4 million barrels of oil from Canada every single day. Look at that. That's 4 times as much as what is imported from OPEC. Mexico is also a major source of foreign oil. And big oil, the oil industry, is pleading with the White House to shield oil and natural gas from these imports. They're warning that Canada is just such a crucial source of oil into the refineries that what could happen is you could see gasoline prices go significantly higher. Gas Buddy has said that if these 25% tariffs go into effect, gas prices in the Great Lakes region could go up by up to 50 cents per gallon. Similarly, go significantly higher in the Midwest and in the Rocky Mountains as well. And so that's why we've got to pay very close attention to what happens next and whether or not the White House ends up putting the tariffs in place, but perhaps having some sort of a carve out so that it doesn't impact gasoline prices. Because Boris, if we've learned anything the last few years, it's that people care very much about how much the price of gasoline is.
It's perhaps part of the reason the price of everyday goods, why Donald Trump got elected. And we should quickly point out, Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, was asked about exceptions specifically for oil and oil products, and she didn't have any specifics. She said that we would find out within the next 24 hours. So Matt Egan will check in again once these tariffs are rolled out to see whether there was a carve out or not. Thanks so much, Matt. In one survey of economists, 95% agree that tariffs will likely mean higher prices for consumers.
Yeah.
Let's discuss this new data with Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's. Mark, thanks so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us. These tariffs looming over the weekend, the White House would not give details on whether there would be exceptions for things like oil products. I wonder how you think the markets and consumers are going to be affected by this.
Well, Boris, it depends, right? It depends on how high the tariffs are, which products, if there are going to be exemptions or carve-outs, how long the tariffs will be in place. So there's a lot of imponderables, which highlights one of the problems with tariffs, and that is it creates a lot of uncertainty for businesses and consumers, and is a problem for economic growth. But it's hard to answer that question because we just literally don't know. I mean, we could play an experiment. Let's say that the president follows through and imposes 25% tariffs on all goods, imported goods from Canada and Mexico, and 10% on all goods from China. No exemptions, no carve outs, and keeps them in place for a year. Then that would add 6 to 0.7% to consumer price inflation. So just to make that concrete, instead of say inflation being 2% over the next year, it would be 2.6 or 2.7%. But that's extreme. That's kind of an outside kind of scenario. I doubt the president has that in mind, but that gives you kind of context.
This afternoon, in response to the message from the White House, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded saying that if the U.S. moves ahead, quote, Canada is ready with a forceful and immediate response. How would a trade war potentially take shape, and specifically which products coming from Mexico and Canada, for example, do you think consumers might wind up paying more for?
Yeah, well, of course, the Prime Minister Trudeau's comments highlight another problem with broad-based
Gas?
tariffs, and that is other countries are going to respond. They're going to retaliate, just like they did in President Trump's first term when he imposed tariffs, on China, and that costs American jobs. It hurts manufacturers who export a lot of product. It hurts farmers and agricultural industries because they export a lot of product. So it does a lot of damage. The kind of, if you look at what we import from Canada, Mexico, China, it's a wide array of products. It's 35% of all of the imported goods that we bring into the country come from those three countries. Those are the big three countries from which we get imports. So it's everything from cars to electronics, furniture, fresh food. We get a lot of avocados and berries and tomatoes from Mexico. Machine tools, from Canada. We get a lot of oil, lumber. So, the cost of home construction is very high, and this would add to it and make it more difficult to afford to buy a home. So just a wide array of products would be affected by the higher tariffs. Again, Boris, if there are no exemptions and carve-outs.
Right. You mentioned the potential for inflation to go up somewhat. Obviously, it hit a high a few years ago, but it's still sort of a stubborn inflation that hasn't gone down as much as the Fed would like.
They lied about how much it is.
I wonder why you think that is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's come way back from where it was, but it's still not back to something that the Federal Reserve feels comfortable with. That's their so-called 2% inflation target. We got data today, for example, Boris, that showed inflation was 2.6, 2.7%. So it's still a bit elevated. I think it's a range of things, but a big part of the difference between current inflation and the Fed's target is the growth in the cost of housing. Rents have been up, and that has kept the housing costs up, and that's what's reflected there. But inflation remains persistent. Really, nothing makes Americans more anxious than having to pay more for groceries and for rent.
Yeah, it's always fun. Anyway, guys, see you later. Take care.